The gas gauge needle trembles on empty. Sarah's hands shake as she grips the steering wheel, staring at the same exact Shell station she passed 3 hours ago. The same faded "Welcome to Millbrook, population 847" sign. The same rusted pickup truck in the parking lot. The same elderly man in overalls who waves at her with that too-wide smile. But here's what Sarah doesn't know yet. She's been driving this same 10-mile stretch of Highway 49 for the past 14 hours, and the road, it's hungry. 24 hours earlier, Sarah Martinez was just another burned-out marketing executive fleeing her crumbling life in Chicago. The divorce papers were signed, the apartment lease expired, and her therapist had suggested a healing road trip to her sister's house in Nevada. Just her, the open highway, and a chance to start over. She'd mapped out the perfect route, straight through America's heartland, avoiding the interstates, taking the scenic byways that promised authenticity. Real America, wide skies and endless possibilities. The first day was everything she'd hoped for. Rolling hills gave way to vast plains, and Highway 49 stretched before her like a promise. She'd even stopped at that charming little town, Millbrook, for coffee and gas. The locals were friendly, if a bit, intense in their hospitality. The elderly man in overalls had waved from his pickup truck, and the gas station attendant had smiled just a little too long. But the road called, and Sarah answered. She had 6 more hours of driving ahead of her, and she was determined to make good time. The first sign something was wrong came with the radio static. Sarah had been listening to a classic rock station when the signal began to fade, replaced by a low humming that seemed to emanate from the road itself. She flipped through the stations, but every frequency carried the same hypnotic drone. Then she saw it, the same weathered billboard advertising for Millbrook Family Diner, home of the famous apple pie. But she'd passed that sign an hour ago. Her phone's GPS showed her moving forward, the little blue dot crawling along Highway 49, but somehow she was seeing the same landmarks. Sarah shook her head, attributing it to highway hypnosis. Long-distance driving could play tricks on the mind. She'd read about it in a travel magazine. But when she rounded the next curve and saw the same abandoned farmhouse with its distinctive red barn, her chest tightened. The fuel gauge hadn't moved, still 3/4 full, exactly where it had been for the past hour. By the third loop, Sarah's logical mind began to fracture. She'd tried turning around, but the road somehow curved back on itself, depositing her right back at the Millbrook town limits. She'd attempted to take side roads, but they all led to dead ends or mysteriously reconnected to Highway 49. The sun hadn't moved in the sky. It hung at the same angle, casting identical shadows across the asphalt. Her phone showed the time advancing, 2:17 p.m., 2:18 p.m., 2:19 p.m., but the world around her remained frozen in an eternal afternoon. The other cars were the problem. The same vehicles appeared at the same moments. A blue sedan with Illinois plates would pass her at mile marker 23, a rust-colored semi-truck would rumble by at mile marker 26, and that elderly man in the pickup truck would wave from the Shell station parking lot every single time. Sarah began to test the boundaries of her prison. She'd honk at the blue sedan. It never responded. She'd try to flag down the semi-truck. It never stopped. She'd approach the elderly man at the gas station, but he'd just smile, that too-wide smile, and say, "Beautiful day for a drive, isn't it?" before returning to his truck. The landscape itself seemed to watch her. The cornfields swayed without wind, their stalks turning to follow her passage. The billboard advertisements repeated in perfect sequence, but their images seemed to shift slightly. The happy family in the diner ad looked increasingly strained, their smiles becoming grimaces. Panic drove Sarah to desperate measures. She pulled over at mile marker 21 and got out of her car, hoping to break the cycle on foot. The air was thick and oppressive, carrying the scent of decay beneath the honeysuckle. She could hear the distant hum of insects, but when she looked closer, there were no bugs to be found. The asphalt beneath her feet was warm, too warm for late October. As she knelt to touch it, she noticed something horrifying. The road was soft, almost flesh-like. It yielded slightly under pressure, and she swore she could feel a pulse beneath the surface. She ran back to her car and drove frantically to the Millbrook town limits. This time she forced herself to interact with the townspeople. At the diner, she ordered coffee from the same waitress who'd served her that first time. Her name tag read Betty, and she had the same rehearsed cheerfulness. "First time through Millbrook?" Betty asked, with mechanical precision. "No," Sarah replied, her voice shaking. "I've been here before. Many times today." Betty's smile flickered, like a glitch in a computer program. "Oh, you must be thinking of somewhere else, honey. We remember all our visitors." The other patrons in the diner all turned to stare at Sarah with identical expressions of hollow curiosity. Their eyes were completely black. Sarah fled back to her car and drove to the town's small library. The building was exactly as she remembered from her first visit, but now she noticed the books were all blank inside. The librarian, a thin woman with gray hair, insisted the books were perfectly normal. "Highway 49 is a beautiful road. People love to drive it. Some never want to leave."
In the library's basement, Sarah found a collection of local newspapers dating back to 1962. The headlines told a story that made her blood run cold. Highway 49 construction halted after worker deaths. Mysterious disappearances along new route. State refuses to investigate cursed highway. The construction of Highway 49 had been plagued by tragedy. Workers had died in unusual accidents, buried alive when Earth inexplicably collapsed, crushed by machinery that moved without operators, found drained of blood with no apparent wounds. The project had been completed using prison labor after regular workers refused to continue. But the real horror was in the fine print. Highway 49 hadn't been built over normal land. It had been constructed through what the local Native American tribe called the Hungry Ground, a place where the earth itself was said to consume those who traveled across it. The government had ignored the warnings, and the road had been completed in 1963. Since then, travelers had vanished. Not crashed or broken down, simply vanished. Their cars would be found abandoned, keys still in the ignition, but the drivers were never seen again. The state had covered up the disappearances, and eventually people stopped reporting them. The newspaper's final entry, dated 1987, was a single line. Highway 49 feeding cycle confirmed. Do not investigate further. Sarah realized the truth with dawning horror. She wasn't trapped by some supernatural force. She was being digested. The road was alive, and it fed on travelers, keeping them in an endless loop while it slowly consumed their essence. The townspeople of Millbrook weren't real. They were echoes, psychic imprints of previous victims who'd been absorbed completely. Armed with this knowledge, Sarah made one final desperate attempt at escape. She drove to the exact center of the loop, mile marker 24.5, and stopped her car. If the road was alive, perhaps she could communicate with it, bargain with it, or find some weakness. She got out and pressed her palms against the warm asphalt. "What do you want?" she screamed at the road. The road responded. The asphalt beneath her hands began to ripple like water, and she felt a consciousness vast and ancient and impossibly hungry. It had been feeding for decades, growing stronger with each victim. It didn't want to harm her. It wanted to keep her forever, to make her part of its eternal feast. Sarah ran back to her car, but the engine wouldn't start. The fuel gauge now read empty, though she had just filled up at the Shell station. Around her, the landscape began to change. The cornfields withered, the buildings of Millbrook crumbled, and the sky darkened to an unnatural twilight. The other cars, the blue sedan, the semi-truck, and the pickup truck, all stopped in the middle of the road. Their drivers got out and walked towards Sarah with mechanical precision. As they approached, she could see they were hollow, their skin translucent, and their eyes completely black. "Join us," they said in unison. "The road is hungry, but it's also home." Sarah made one last desperate attempt at escape. She grabbed a flare from her emergency kit and lit it, throwing it onto the road's surface. The asphalt hissed and writhed like wounded flesh, and for a moment the loop faltered. She felt the boundaries of her prison weaken, the endless repetitions stuttered, and she caught a glimpse of the real world beyond, a normal highway with normal traffic where the sun was setting and time moved forward. But as she reached for her car keys, the road fought back. Tendrils of warm asphalt wrapped around her ankles, pulling her down. The hungry ground was tired of playing games.
Sarah's car was found 3 days later by a highway patrol officer, abandoned at mile marker 24.5 on Highway 49. The keys were still in the ignition, her phone was on the dashboard, and her luggage was undisturbed in the back seat. There was no sign of Sarah Martinez. The official report listed it as a voluntary missing person case. The officer noted that her car had exactly 3/4 of a tank of gas, which seemed unusual for someone who'd been driving for hours. But these details were buried in bureaucratic paperwork and forgotten. Highway 49 still winds through the heartland, a scenic route that GPS systems recommend for travelers avoiding the interstates. The Millbrook Town Limits sign still welcomes visitors, and the Shell station still serves gas to passing motorists. The elderly man in overalls still waves from his pickup truck, and the diner still serves its famous apple pie. But sometimes, late at night, drivers report strange experiences on Highway 49. They see the same landmarks repeatedly. Their fuel gauges stop moving, and their radios fill with static. Most manage to break free before it's too late, writing off the experiences highway hypnosis or fatigue. Some don't. The road is patient. It's been hungry for 60 years, and it has all the time in the world. It knows that eventually someone will drive those 10 miles between the town limits and think to themselves, "Have I been here before?" And when they do, the loop will begin again. Because Highway 49 isn't just a road, it's a living trap, a predator that feeds on the very American dream of freedom and mobility. It takes our desire to escape, to start over, to find ourselves on the open road, and it turns it into an eternal prison. Sarah Martinez wanted to drive toward a new life. Instead, she became part of the road itself, another echo in the endless loop, another voice whispering to future travelers, "The road is hungry, but it's also home." And somewhere in the American heartland, Highway 49 waits for its next victim, patient and eternal and impossibly hungry.